Hey everyone, JP here with another edition of Bite Size Brilliance. And in this one, we're going to take a look at leadership and what we call the multiplier effect. I mean, that's such a great title, isn't it? I mean, you could even see it on a book. Well, guess what? You can. And it's a book, if you look really closely, you'll actually see my name on it. And that's bonkers. Now, if you'd have said to me 4 or 5 years ago, you'd have been involved in writing a book with a doctor, I'd have told you were nuts and probably really questioned your sanity. But kind of 3-4 years down the line, it's there in black and white. And I spent kind of 15 to 20 years with W.H. Smith in my corporate career, who now stock a book with my name on it. Now that is bonkers, but it is possible. And I think that kind of says it all for me. I mean, people, you're all capable of incredible things. You're incredible people. But actually, there's one thing that consistently gets in our way, which is us. And I think it links with leadership. Leadership for me is all about people. It's beyond a job title. It's beyond a position. It is all around people. Getting the best out of your people. Enabling them to be the very best version of themselves. And Colin Powell said it best for me, really. You can have all the grandest of plans, the grandest of strategies. It is the people that are going to make the real difference. And how can you motivate them to be that very best version of themselves? That 2% version of them. You have to be people-centered, and that's what we'll look at today. So we'll look at 3 things, okay? We're going to do a little bit of appreciative inquiry, looking at from your experience about the good bosses, the best bosses you've ever worked for, and some of the worst ones as well, about what have you learned from them? What did they do? How did it make you feel? We'll do that in a minute in a little exercise. Then I'm going to give you 3 areas of focus, and I think these are the 3 key areas that actually make you people-centered and will get them being that very best version themselves. And my final thought, I'm going to leave you with this and keep with me with this one, is I'm going to talk about soup. You might think that's a bit weird and what the hell has that got to do with leadership? But stick with me, it'll all become clear, I hope, and therefore I'll leave you with that thought. So let's get on and look at these kind of our experiences. What did we learn from our experiences? What did we learn from the best bosses we've ever worked for and some of the worst bosses we've ever worked for? So if you grab yourself a pen and paper, I'm going to get you to do a little exercise, okay? So if you've got your pen and paper, put a line down the middle of the page. Now we're going to take this from the kind of worst bosses perspective first. So do worst bosses and then do the same exercise for the world's best bosses you've ever worked for. Now on the left hand side for both these categories, write down what did they do. What did they do that put them in the category of worst boss or best boss? And on the right hand side of the page, I want you to tell me how it made you feel. What they did and how did that make you feel? I think we learn so much from both the worst and the best bosses we've ever worked for. And I think it's important just to take a few minutes to capture that information, to capture that learning for us all to go forward. So right now, press pause on the video, do that exercise for me, and I'm going to see you right back on the other side of you doing that exercise. So welcome back, and how did you get on? What did you learn from the people you put in the best category? And what did you learn from those in the worst? I think you learn just as much from people you put in the worst category than you do the best. But what did you learn from them? How did it make you feel? You probably wrote things down like motivated. But I'd ask you to go a little bit further, a little bit deeper to understand what did they do specifically that made you feel motivated? It's those specific actions I really want you to think about, because actually that's what means something to you. And I think certainly I have a hero boss who is now one of my best friends, who once said to me at the age of 18 or 19, would I ever condemn you only to be as good as me? And that's stuck with me over the last kind of 30 years or so around actually, I want people to be that best version. I want them to be better than me. If they're capable of it, then let me help them, set them free to do it. And I think it comes back to the kind of the shadow you cast as a leader. And what shadow do you want to cast as a leader? How do you need to be to enable that shadow to be there? Because no matter what you're doing, you are being watched. If you've contracted that well-known disease called responsibility, you are being watched. How you are accepting of information, how you're even walking into the office, people are looking to see whether you're okay with stuff because you cast that shadow over everybody. And I think now looking at things, those 3 areas of focus about what does it take to be a great leader. And there's three things there, and the three things I want us to focus on are connection, potential, and reason. So let's take them individually, shall we? Let's look at connection. I mean, this is so important to us as a human race. We are hardwired for connection. We work better together than we do on our own. And that feeling of connection is very powerful. But how connected are you with your people? Do you know them? Do you know their families? Do you know their kids? Do you know how old they are? What exams they may be taking? Do you know what kind of makes them tick? Do you know the kind of work that really kind of gets them motivated and some of the stuff that doesn't? Do you really know them? And I think when people feel that connection together, they are willing to kind of put in that extra effort, because you do feel that connection together. Connected as a team, connected as individuals, I think is one of the most important things you can do. And if you look at it, I mean, Gallup, the survey people, over 40 years of research, and they look at kind of engagement with the Q12 questions. One of the biggest questions they ask is, someone at work seems to care about me as a person. Not for what I do, not for my job title, but for me as a person. Do you understand me and help me get the best out of what I'm doing? I think that's a really, really important question. And if you ask it of yourself, is the answer yes or no? I don't know. I think it's really, really important. And looking at potential, I think we are capable of incredible things. We have that potential, realizing your potential. It's a word I think gets overused sometimes, but I think it's a huge thing. Do you know what people's strengths are? And I think strengths are a huge, it's a game changer for me, because I think in the kind of organisations I've been involved in the past, and some of the ones I work with now, we seem to be obsessed by people's weaknesses. If I remember back to my performance reviews, we used to look at my strengths and my weakness, and my development plans would always go around my weaknesses. Why would we want to develop my weaknesses? I mean, yes, they need to be good enough. I mean, but once they're good enough for what I do, let's look at what I'm really good at. And crucially for me, what gives me energy. Because that energizing factor about what I'm great at is the bit that really sets me alight. It really brings me to life. So maybe, is there a way that I can use my strengths more often to the kind of benefit of the organisation and the team that I'm working in? I mean, there's another Gallup question there around, actually, at work, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? Now, that's not every minute of every day. That's at least once a day. But would you be surprised if I told you that the UK population only answer yes 17% of the time? 17% of the population would answer yes to that question. 83% say no. What an opportunity. And if that's your team or your organisation, imagine 50 or 60 or 70% of the people answering yes to that question. I think that's a huge game changer. Just flipping it around about from maybe developing my weaknesses to how do we use people's strengths more often? Do I know them well enough? How connected do I know that what really brings them life, gives them energy? That for me is an absolute game changer. Now, I know you've seen this number before, and it's a magic number of 2.9013, but I want to look at it from a leadership perspective and the feedback that you give or the feedback that you get. And we all know that kind of negative feedback weighs heavier than the positive stuff we get. You've all probably had a great performance review where there's been lots of positives and maybe only one negative, and that's the one you take away and that's the one you remember. But Lasada, as Andy said in the video about the survival plan, is about getting the balance right, getting that beyond the 3-to-1 and into more like 5 or 6-to-1. That's where people start to flourish. So when you review the negative and positive feedback you're giving, if you got the balance right, you need to get 5 or 6 bits of positive feedback for every 1 bit of negative. It's not to 0, it's to 1. People will respect you for the 1 and do something about it as long as they're getting the 6 or 5 bits of kind of quality positive feedback. You get it. So from a leadership perspective, what are you giving out? How are you doing it? Are you having those quality conversations? And I'd ask you just to kind of review that and challenge yourself next time you're going into a conversation. Am I getting that 5 or 6 bits of positive stuff and the 1 bit thing I really want them to do something about? Now, the final part of this kind of triumvirate, if you like, is reason. Getting people involved in something much bigger than them. Now, you've seen one of our earlier videos called the Why Factor, which talks about your purpose in life, or the purpose of your team in life, or the purpose of your organisation. And I think for me, that's good. Getting people connected to and getting people involved in something much bigger than them. Giving them a reason why, if you like, that their job is so important, what they do is so important. They will love you for it. They'll give you blood, sweat and tears. Kind of without it, any team's going to struggle. So make sure that your team understand the reason and the purpose that they exist. So let's just review what we've covered. We've kind of looked at our learnings from our best and worst bosses we've ever worked for. I think it's really important to take the learnings and maybe what we can do in the future. We've also looked at those 3 key areas for me, which is about connection, potential and reason. I think those are so important, particularly connection, about being connected as individuals, really understanding the people you work with so that actually you can get the best out of them, enabling them to flourish, which is about giving them that kind of space to work to their strengths a little bit more and actually being involved in that bigger reason why. But I talked to you about soup, didn't I? And this is about emotional contagion. Daniel Goleman talks about it's all like emotional soup. We are all adding ingredients into an emotional soup. All of your team members, all of you are adding different ingredients into the soup that is your organisation or your team. So what ingredient are you adding as the leader? Maybe it's the seasoning, kind of the final element. But I think it's important to know what kind of ingredient maybe you're missing. And my final little point for you to reflect on and maybe think about is what ingredient are you going to be adding that you think is going to make the biggest difference in the coming year? I think that's something you can start doing straight away. You don't need any reviews of doing it. Just get going and right, this is the ingredient that I'm going to focus on in the next 12 months, because that's going to be down to you. So listen, thank you for listening. I really do appreciate you taking the time and watching this little video on a subject that I think can really set people alight. I genuinely want people kind of dancing, bouncing into work. And I think the leader's role is so important with that. So for now, stay safe. And I really do look forward to speaking to you very soon.